Greg, welcome to the show again.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
So this is a really interesting story. We got a lot of things to hit up on with you here today. Let's start there. $850 million lawsuit. But here's what's interesting to me. It's the government suing the banks.
There is a special law that starts...
Who also bailed out the banks.
Well, that's
who also
part
have ownership of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
That's part of why they're suing them, though. It's interesting the way it all worked out. The law they're suing under started in 1989, to bring you back in time, and it was a law that dealt with the banks failing. Remember what was going on back then? Resolution Trust Company and all that type of stuff that was happening. So this law said that when banks defraud people, the government alone, no one else but the government, has a right to sue them and have lesser standards of proof for fraud. So it's a very plaintiff-friendly law. And the government is saying basically the banks had to know this was junk when they sold it. People spent a lot of money on it, and they should have to pay that back and pay fines and interest and everything else.
The problem, when I look back on 2007, it was a top-to-bottom problem. You had these products being developed in the secondary market, being slung out there by the banks, by unlicensed loan officers, and I don't remember too many homeowners that weren't willing to take the cash out on that refinance of their home. So hard to really place blame, but what really is so interesting is the fact that you have the government who is suing the banks. The government bailed out the banks, and then the government GSEs of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's almost kind of like we're suing ourselves, kind of. But who cares about the banks and the government? Let's talk about the consumer. If you own stock in Bank of America or some of these other major lawsuits that have occurred, is there anything you can do?
Well, not if you own stock in those companies. If you were defrauded and you thought you bought something you shouldn't have bought from a business or a bank or something else, those things you can do individually. The government chooses carefully what it's going to prosecute, and usually they're very large cases and they're very fact specific. So the laws that an individual investor could use for stocks or bonds or mortgage-backed securities are the laws that are the laws of the United States and the state of California. And those are a little bit harder to prosecute. And normally they're done by way of a class action. We've all heard of class actions.
Right. And you specialize in some of these major cases here in San Diego with Teeple Hall out in UTC. So how would that work as an individual versus a class action?
It depends on the facts of the case. In a nutshell, just to make it from 10,000 feet looking down, if you have a case where you were defrauded by somebody, I lied to you and said, I'm going to sell you a house and didn't tell you the roof leaked. That's your case. If you have a case where you bought a brand new house, and everybody has the same roof problem because it was built wrong.
Builders.
Exactly. Then that case can arguably be brought as a class action where more people get together, which makes it easier and less expensive for the individual person to prosecute the case.
So let's say hypothetically you owned, there's a big real estate guy here in San Diego that just got sentenced to 3 years in jail. I'll leave his name out of it. We don't need to prosecute him here on the show. But he was put in jail, big name here in San Diego, and it was because he defrauded a lot of homeowners, forged W-2s, pay stubs, things like that, right here in San Diego. Does that create a class action lawsuit? And if it does, how do you even start?
Well, the way you start, you don't really care about whether it's a class action, individual action. If you want to get paid what you're owed, is the way it works. The truth of it is, if you're suing, by way of example, Bank of America, and they've got tons of money and tons of lawyers, and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to sue you and I'm going to make you give me all these documents, they're going to say, we're not giving you anything. Because we don't care. You will never push us far enough to make us do it.
Or we'll settle and it's a slap on the wrist.
They don't usually settle unless they have to. They settle when they're going to lose. That's the truth of litigation.
Got it.
They don't pay unless they have to. But let's assume that as opposed to just Craig suing, we've got 1,000 other people in the same lawsuit. So now the liability goes up.
Got it. Say that 5 times.
As opposed to sewing, which would be something I couldn't help
I've never sued anybody, but the reality is I haven't ever sewed anything either.
The truth of it is, most of these cases are brought as class or collective actions because it raises the price of poker for the financial institution or the bank, and it makes it so people can litigate these expensive cases where you couldn't justify doing that if it was just you.